Hey, thanks all for coming. Welcome to those online. Just you feel welcome in this place. So continuing with the theme about various gifts and ministries within the New Testament, I'll be looking at the ministry of an evangelist, which is kind of following on from what Brother Andre was speaking about a few weeks ago. If you've not seen it, it's well worth a watch, going back to look over the 5 or controversially maybe 4-fold ministry. I'll have a discussion of that at some point, but I'll be zeroing in on the evangelist aspects. Okay. So a bit of a background, just so we establish a base for what we're going to be discussing. So, what is evangelism? In fact, I wasn't going to do this, but let's have just a quick shout out. How do people define or think of, or what kind of sparks of thoughts when I say evangelism? Anybody? Okay, John. Outreach. Okay, it's good. I'm going to come back to that in a sec. Declaration. Okay, declaration of the gospel. Okay. But interesting there. How Brother Markey mentioned. He said declaration first, and then he went on to say of the gospel. I'm actually going to suggest that maybe just the first part is actually where the base of it came from. So the word evangelism, it comes from the Greek word euangelion or euangelizo, which is translated as good news or gospel. So generally in the New Testament, whenever you see the words good news, snapped together, or the word gospel, it comes from the word euangelion, and so naturally from that you can kind of work out the EVA. It translates or is adopted as a new word as evangelism, and the idea is that it was just used as a general word back in the old days, as just generally saying good news, but it tends to be used quite a lot in the military sense. So when a Greek or Roman emperor would have won a battle, rather than tweeting it out or sending a Snapchat or sending out a group email, he would actually send out a messenger. This idea about someone that would go to herald the victory. So you got an emperor, say Caesar, won a massive victory. So he'd send out people who'd go around the towns, go around the villages, go around the cities, and say, "Our country has won this massive, great victory. Let's rejoice. This is good news. This is our evangelion. This we get to celebrate, and so forth." And this idea is actually perhaps already familiar to you, and it's certainly familiar to tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people across the world every week or so. And I'm just going to give me a sec. I've forgotten my back. Okay. Right. I see nothing yet, but okay. So right. So this idea that so a herald will go out and proclaim this good news, and there's a particular one, even going back to say 400 BC. This is going by terms of legend now, not solely in the Bible, and at a particular battle between the Greeks and the Persians, that there was massive battle at a place called Marathon. So there was essentially you had to get the emperor had to go and get some help with the Spartans. That wasn't going on, and there would be messengers running to and fro. It said that one of them ran 150 miles in one direction to trying to get for help, and then 150 miles back, all within 4 days, and then an extra bit. And as legend has it, there was this guy named Phidippides who had the challenge of doing the last leg of it. So after victory was won, Pheidippides, he had to lace up. One sec. Oh no, it's every day. So Pheidippides' boss, he was told, okay, we've got a message that needs to be given out. We've won. You need to go give the message. So any thoughts on how far Pheidippides had to run now to give the message now? Any thoughts? The clues in the name. Dondre? Close. Worse. No. Bingo, gold star, 26.2 miles. So Pheidippides, he laced up. Okay, he's got a message. Go. The thing about why Pheidippides is doing this. Let's keep that there for a second. Right. Think about why Pheidippides was doing this. He wouldn't have been a soldier, but instead all he could do was just like the best he could. So he couldn't fight, or not. He's not chosen or strong enough to fight. So what was he doing? All he could do was run. He was one that was tasked to give a message. And it said that after 26.2, probably wouldn't have worn the latest or most comfortable shoes, probably wouldn't have had energy gels, wouldn't have had water stations throughout, wouldn't have been a nice, smooth, flat surface. It would have been rocky terrain, perhaps over hills and mountains and all of this. But it was up to him, specifically, to deliver the message, to deliver the good news of the victory victory over the Persians. He would have had, well, as legend has it anyway, could have had a heart condition. So not only was he not strong enough or skilled enough to be a soldier, his physical condition wasn't one where he could do that which, let's say, what everyone else could do. And as he continued on, reaching the 26.2 miles, he finally reached his destination, and all he could say, just get out, was victory, like joy, we've won, before he collapsed and literally died. Right. So there's this idea that, so I wonder then, when the apostles, when the disciples were talking about the idea about evangelism, about the need to give the message, if they would have had that same kind of determination, that same kind of passion, that even though not all evangelists were called to be pastors or preachers or whatever, all they could do was the best they could, and it's maybe just simply just giving the message. So it's interesting, therefore, that okay. So the first four books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, we often refer to them as, like, say, the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, and so forth. As I learned in Bible college way back, it's actually more appropriate to call them as the Gospel according to, because there's only one good news. Mark is not the good news. Jesus is. So it's Mark's reflection, Mark's understanding, and so forth. So when you look at the Gospels, it's clear that they're reflective of different audiences. So you've got Matthew, written out to the Jews, and it's evident within the writing. You see it as kingdom of heaven and so forth, references within that. Within Luke, which is done as a more, with a doctoral kind of approach, is just like very, he's gotten like reports and so forth, and he focuses a lot more on the individuals, on people, and you can see like the similarities and yet differences with Matthew. Is the beginning of his book, it starts off with talking about Jesus' genealogy back to Abraham. With Luke, it emphasizes Jesus as a human being, so it goes all the way back to Adam with his. With John, it talks about Jesus as God, and it has a more personal aspect to it. But when it comes to Mark, it becomes clear, when we look at it, it's the audience is written for the Romans. And interestingly, I mean, when I started looking into this, it's one of those things which kind of clicks. One of those things I knew in the back of my head but didn't click. This is the only one of the four Gospels to actually start off with the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. That's the other Gospels, they just tend to start off with, in the beginning was the Word, or, this book I'm writing and so forth. So this is the actually only one of the Gospels which actually starts off with, this is a Gospel book. And so within Mark, proportionally, it actually references the word gospel or good news a lot more than the other ones. And so interesting, when it talks about the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, it's reflective of the same kind of idea that the Roman emperors and the Greek emperors would have. So when you had the heralds, the messengers saying, good news of our emperor's victory, good news of our emperor who is the Son of God who's doing this, Mark's challenging back and he's saying, Jesus is the good news. Jesus is the Son of God. This was an outright declaration. Imagine Prime Minister Rishi Sunak coming in, and I'm going to look at him and say, "Hey, you're a nice guy, but there's only one guy who truly ministered to me, who gave his life for me." You might take that as a personal affront. Or if the king came up and says, "Hi, well, thank you for welcoming me here." I'm like, "Oh, hey Chuck, but there's only one king truly that I'm gonna bow down towards. There's only one majesty. There's only one highness that I'm going to recognise." You might take that as a personal affront, and I'm sure you might give some argument as to the appropriate respect or whatever that should give. So, but likewise, so Mark, when he's saying this in a Roman-dominated society, this is going to be almost like a declaration of war. He's saying, like, there's a new boss in town. His name is Jesus, and he's the one that's won this great victory. And so these emperors can have their little victories, but Jesus is the one who is the good news. Okay. But then when we talk, so when Mark mentioned about a declaration and specifically of Jesus. So the idea about evangelism is simply a declaration, but when we discuss it, we're talking about specifically about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. Oh, sorry, I thought I brought out the scripture. So, just summarize in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 1-4, it talks specifically about what Paul's writing to the Corinthians, and says that our gospel is about the death of Jesus and the burial and the resurrection. And I'm going to look a little bit later as to why and how we can particularly use that within evangelism. So when we're looking at evangelism in the general sense, as Dondre noted, it's about the idea about going out. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because when I was going through this, although I got the concept of outreach, and that's certainly the word I was accustomed to when I started off within this church, and so over the last maybe I'm going to say 10 years, just off the top of my head, my thoughts more is about open air service, that we bring it out to the people. So when Jesus was he was talking about evangelism, he didn't actually specifically say, okay, so this is what you do. You need to invite someone out for a coffee. You need to give them a tract and so forth. He didn't necessarily give a 5-point program as to, do a 5-point program as to giving out the message and the gospel. All Jesus did was he just lived the life. He gave the idea that we're supposed to emulate these ideas. So when we, I'll skip on to that. So in John chapter 4, verses 7-10, it says, "There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink, for his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealing with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou would have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water." So Jesus' behaviour that we emulate in terms of evangelism is one that we're prepared to go outside of our social circle, go outside of society's norms, to go outside of our usual boundaries to reach anybody and everybody. And I mentioned about like how Jesus necessarily didn't say start off with these programs or anything. Jesus' best method simply for conversion was simply through having conversation. And conversion starts with simple conversation. And certainly when I've had more of the successes I've had during evangelism has just been through simple one-on-one chats, more so than handing out a flyer, setting up a website or whatever. The various evangelistic means, but most of the times, just simply sitting down one-on-one, having a discussion, might lead to a debate sometimes, or it might lead to, it can go in any direction. There's the opportunity there just to meet people where they are, find out what's going on with them. So we look to get to know them as individuals. Rather than seeing them necessarily as projects, there's certainly one issue I had when I first started out within the church, and I was like, eager beaver, wanted everyone to know the gospel. And it's kind of that reminds me of that phrase, using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut kind of thing. Always going heavy-handed, always sparks more debates and arguments more than I'd like anyway. But over time, eventually I just learned, where are people at? What are their issues? Obviously, this woman at Samaria, her issue was regarding marriage and relationships and so forth. Another example was Jesus talked with Zacchaeus. He had a chat with him, and granted, it's a bit bold, inviting himself around his house for lunch and everything, but he got to know Zacchaeus and identified what his needs or what his issue was with regards to financial issues and his love of money on that. So Jesus' model for evangelism was to talk with people, find out what their needs were, and show how he could meet those needs. And then we see how this was picked up by the disciples. So in Luke 10, I'm not going to read all of it. I'll just read about halfway down. It says about, in whatsoever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. Then your peace will rest upon it. And then in that same house remain, eating and drinking such things as they give. So establishing relationship, making themselves friendly, allowing that conversation. When people are eating, when your mouth's not like stuffed up full of Nando's, you end up having a chat over these kind of what's like kind of gnawing at people, and then you get to show what Jesus can do within their lives. And then right at the end it says, heal the sick that are therein. Again, meeting their physical needs. So discuss what their mental issues are, discuss the physical, discuss the spiritual, and so forth. There are various ways in which Jesus can meet their needs. And then eventually it's put into action through the apostles. When in Acts chapter 8, verse 25, it reads, and they, when they had testified and preached the word of the Lord, returned to Jerusalem and preached the gospel in many villages of the Samaritans. So just within 8 chapters of the book of Acts, they're beginning to fulfill the Great Commission and then going out from where Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then the uttermost parts of the world. So within 8 chapters, they've got to like kind of the third stage of that now. They've actually started to go out beyond their social borders. Right. So we're looking at the idea about the ministry of evangelists. Yeah, skip on. That evangelism is expected of all followers of Christ. So in Mark 16:15 it says, and he said unto them, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So this is a commission, a commandment, a directive given by Jesus saying that everyone is to go and do it. And not just in the New Testament, but this idea was also given out in the Old as well. So one key example of this, so good, it appears again within Romans chapter 10, verse 15, when so Paul's writing to Romans and saying, how shall they preach except they be sent? And it is written, how beautiful are the feet of him that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. So this idea that everyone is to be getting involved. if you just look at the mission statement of a company, of say a Fortune 500 or FTSE 100 company, one of their key missions is, and they might not say it directly, but it's going to be to make money, to grow as a business. A government might be to stay in power and to do various actions or activities to build it up. The mission statements of the church is simply get more, bring more in. You got yourself in, great. Get some more people in. The idea about the church is about growing to, about the furtherance of the message, furtherance of the kingdom, and so forth with that. But then, conversely, evangelism is expected of some followers of Christ. So this is a key verse, eventually. So in Ephesians 4:11-12, as Dondre touched on a few weeks back, says, "And he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfection of the saints, the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ." So here we've got what might seem like a contradiction. Evangelism is expected of everybody, but then it's also talking about this kind of small subset that some are to be evangelists. And it's one of those ones where if there's a calling or expectation for some to perhaps go beyond what what others might do. One of my earliest memories of evangelism is down in the Bullring. I would have been about 6 or 7, and the Bullring back then, Gen Z don't know, it was awful. To be honest, the buildings, it looked grim even for the 80s. But yeah, I always remember like walking down the ramp where the bull is now. It wasn't like there wasn't like a floor there. It actually went slightly underground, and there was a preacher on a almost literal soapbox, just preaching out. I always remember just saying, "You're going to hell," like to literally anybody and everybody that was walking past. That was my first memory of someone evangelizing. So actually, when I come into Lighthouse, I'm thinking, "Oh, is this what we're going to be doing now?" But well, thankfully, it was actually quite the converse. We actually, we actually look like we're giving good news as opposed to a bad message of people going to hell. So then Paul goes on to specify about the limitations sometimes of the ministries. Compared with what's given to everybody. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 16-17, he says, "And I baptized also the house of Stephanus. Besides, I know not whether I baptized any other. For Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect." So I'm sure we can all agree that everyone should be baptized. Every follower of Christ should be baptized in Jesus' name. But he's actually going on to say, Christ didn't send me to baptize. So Paul's ministry is effectively was just to go out. If he could baptize, great. If he's got the time, the opportunity, great. He'll baptize who he could. If it wasn't going to cause an issue within the churches where people would say, "Oh, I got to be baptized by Paul. Who were you baptized by?" It's like, "Oh, only Apollos," and so forth. But his focus was about preaching the gospel. So certainly, everybody is called to evangelize, but there's a small subset who are going to be doing it as a life, and we know these people. You talk to them, and everything out of their mouth is Jesus, like in a positive way. And by way of example, is some people which springs to my mind. So we've got John Wesley, and within this as well, we've also got George Whitefield. So George Whitefield, evangelist, encouraged John Wesley, and John Wesley went about and eventually founded the Methodist Church. We've got Evan Roberts, one of the key figures during the Welsh Revival at the turn of the 20th century. In the early 20th century, got in the middle there, you got Amy Semple McPherson, and she was actually quite innovative in how she portrayed the gospel. Now, this is I think it's like within the 1920s or so, and she would use costumes, Hollywood kind of style, use theatrics, and she was one of the first people, in fact, the first woman to use the radio for evangelizing as well. So, innovative, and she briefly partnered with a group from the Azusa Street Revival, giving a great passionate Pentecostal message out. Top right, we've got Brother Yun, the heavenly man, as he's dubbed sometimes, and he's an evangelist in China. And despite the oppression of the Chinese authorities, he just persevered. And I had the honour of meeting him about 20 years ago. He spoke at Oxford, and he's just such a humble guy. You wouldn't think anything of him, but yet the great move of God that he's done like throughout China is just awesome. And on the right, one's dubbed perhaps one of the greatest evangelists of the 20th century, Billy Graham, speaking to packed out stadiums, giving a message across the world. And later on, I got to see, saw a video of him when I was about 12 or so. So started to get a positive message of evangelism then. But so these are the ideas of when we of those with an evangelistic ministry. It can be daunting. We look at these like speaking like effectively to whole countries, to stadiums, and so forth, doing all these things, and we think, could I really do that? And the thing about God is that He can use anybody, and use everybody. It's like it doesn't matter like what kind of stage of life we're in, no matter what kind of social circle we're in. If God's called someone to have this evangelistic ministry, He can use you. I'll go on the record and say, I don't, at least not at this time anyway, I don't have that specific ministry. Nonetheless, I'm still called to give that message wherever I can. I mentioned about how, you speak to an evangelist and the first words out of their mouth are Jesus. Mine's going to be try and talk about the weather or something like that. So it's, you should see me when I'm leading a team meeting or so. We've got like a couple of minutes, but I'll try to give in the gospel wherever I can anyway. I say, what are you doing this weekend? Well, I'm going to Llandudno. Oh, why? Because I've got a church there, so it'll be fun. But leading the church. So it's either usually tends to be a conversation stopper or ooh, that's very interesting. But I'll let you decide which tends to be the one more often. Can I get the next couple of slides up, please, Kay? So as I mentioned, we're all called to evangelise in some capacity. So let's have a look at some of the approaches that we can take. I mentioned about just general conversations. I mentioned as well that I tend to be quite heavy-handed when I gave the gospel in my early Christian years. What helped me was actually just simply practicing, and it feels silly doing it, but just like sitting down with at the time with my mum and my sister at the time, and just going through. Like just kind of doing a practice evangelistic things, like practice giving the gospel, helps identify strengths and weaknesses, help to get an idea as to what scriptures to use at particular points. So at some points you need to use, like you want to go in with a oneness message. Sometimes you want to just give simple words of encouragement. The idea that we need to also identify about how to give it to different cultures, to different personalities. Also recognise people's histories. Not everyone's always is going to be receptive to the gospel straight away, perhaps through trauma or abusive or whatever kind of past they might be going through. It takes time. Sometimes it may not just be in a simple afternoon, maybe repeated ones. And certainly taking that approach of actually being able to, I'm going to say it was long-lasting evangelistic, but nonetheless I was able to bring like a Muslim one time into church and also a gay person as well. And although this would have been counter to their culture and everything, nonetheless, they wanted to see a bit more about and what made me different, or what I had to, what the church, or what Jesus Christ could offer. So Jesus, he met people where they were at. He identified what they were going through, and showed how he could do different things. Coffee mornings. This one's kind of one that's been bugging at me for a while. Remember that before we had this church building, when we bounced around from like hotels and all these kind of things, we were looking at warehouses and stuff at one point. Always remember what we're going to do when we get the church building. And there's always talk about, we could have a crash, or we could have coffee mornings. We could do all these like kind of evangelistic things. But then we got it starts off in the middle of lockdown. We couldn't do as much of these social activities that we like, and unfortunately to say, we've not got that excuse anymore. So I do want to try and, as a personal level, not actually discuss it with the pastor or anything at some point, but we got to, use this as a base for being able to have like coffee mornings or going out to someone having a coffee or whatever else normal people do to socialise. You'll have to let me know. Open air services. As Donjo mentioned, outreach, but I would go so far as to say open air service instead. Outreach to me is just simply giving a tract, singing the songs, boom, gone. Open air services, we actually get to minister, and I like the approach that we take. We bring church out to the people. I've always thought this is more of the church mindset as given in the Book of Acts compared with others, or other approaches. And social media, one of the approaches I took around the turn of the millennium or so was being able to reach people through coding, through HTML and so forth, through websites. We have the opportunity through Facebook posts, tweet, whatever they call it, on whatever tweeting is called these days, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever. Those conversations that we can have one-on-one, we can have it with a broader audience, but allow still people to DM us or just have friendly conversations. I'd like to think online. And sometimes it's just simply about just spreading the seed out. We might not always see the fruition of it. I was having a conversation with someone a few weeks back, and they were frustrated, perhaps a little disgruntled, that they'd be giving out their message, giving out the gospel message like so many times over so many years, but hadn't had that. But sometimes it's simply about planting the seeds, about spreading the seed out. Paul went on to say, he planted, but you know what? Apollos watered. Someone else was going to do that instead. But ultimately, it's God. It's God who gives the increase. It's God who's going to work on the people's hearts to do a miraculous work within their lives. And so I was going to offer a time of testimony for people to talk, but if I'll say, yeah, is all okay? Kenny's giving me that. All right, I've got 6 minutes left. That's cool. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, I'll give about 3 or 4 people the opportunity now to give a testimony of how perhaps of how successes that they've had through evangelism, or how evangelism brought them into the church. While you have to think of that about that, I was going to share my one. So I was in high school, about age 15. And a few of my friends were discussing about various religions, Islam, Christianity, and so forth. For me, it could have been a knife's edge. I was interested about what Islam had to say, but Christianity, there just seemed to be more of an appeal to it. And those simply just through someone saying, "Oh, I'll go to this church. Would you like to come along sometime?" I said, maybe in a few weeks or so. And then God stood on me, touched my heart, and said, I want to go in this week. So I called up the guy and said, I'm going to go this week. And then I settled down on I want to say the 4th of January, 97, and then just been coming along here ever since. So despite a church background, which was more of a social, cultural one, I decided to adopt it for myself as a personal one, and then it just changed my life and ends up doing a great work in me. So, okay, so a few minutes left. Has anyone else got a evangelistic testimony they would like to share? Sister Wynne? I'm just going to run back over, give you the mic. Learning from my lessons.
A long time ago, I used to be a bit of a party animal, and my very, very best friend went to a Billy Graham revival at Wembley Stadium, and she got filled, and all her family that went with her, and then she spent the next sort of 3 to 5 weeks working hard to try and convince me to start coming to church with her. And I was like, one of these days, yeah. And then eventually she shamed me into coming, because she said, if I had been inviting you to come to a party, right, you would have been at my house before I even put the phone down. And I'm inviting you, and tears were in her eyes, I'm inviting you to come to something that's going to save your life, and I can't get you to come. Hurting my heart. So that was what brought me. And then I realized also that my son was 9 years old, and I'd never taken him to church. I'd never given him the opportunity to find out about Jesus, to accept or reject. So that was how.
Thank you, Wynne. And it's highlights the point there that sometimes I think it might be in First Peter. It talks about sometimes you need to save with fire. Sometimes you need to like not necessarily say scare someone, but yeah, just trying to spend on a person. Might want to just like kind of give that a tougher gospel message in order to bring them in. Has anyone else got a testimony? So I've got 3 minutes left. No, all right. Just do it.
When I was hitchhiking to the States, a young man, not to the States, in the States, a young man witnessed to me, and it didn't mean anything to me. I couldn't understand him. But then I believe he started praying for me, and about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, a Pentecostal minister told me that he was a Pentecostal minister. And I said to him, "How come you're not telling me about Jesus?" And that was the beginning of me committing my life to the Lord Jesus.
Cool, thank you. So, just like how Mark began his gospel with like kind of this innocuous statements, but it was actually kind of loaded so much. The little conversations that we have, these little, these like small sentences or small prompts can end up motivating someone. We can change lives in a impressive and, well, I'll say Jesus is one that changed lives. We can just like point people in the right direction. So although we might not all have the ministry of an evangelist, we're nonetheless all called to evangelize. If you like, there's a couple of books. I've not got to bring them with me today, but I've got a couple of books which might motivate you. So if this is something that's God might be touching on your heart about, I've got some books which might tip you over the edge in terms of wanting to get into having an evangelistic ministry. So I'm just going to wrap up there with that. So actually, I just and so as a closing thought, just remember Mark chapter 1 verse 1, the beginning of the gospel. Think about how Mark and Matthew and so forth, they presented the gospel in different ways to different audiences. Have a think about how you might want to present Jesus depending on the various audiences that you have. God bless you all in Jesus' name.